Alright, everybody, and welcome to Vanguard Episode 7.
Yeah, so in the news just last week, Trump began cutting parts of the VA out. So whenever he went in there, he basically took out about 40,000 jobs from the VA. Now their total workforce is about 400,000 jobs. Davey, what do you think of him cutting those from the VA?
I haven't looked into the VA all that much and into the corruption of it. I do remember seeing an interview with Pete Hegseth before he got actually voted into his position. And he did talk about all the corruption because he really cares about veterans. He is a veteran and he's really focused on making life better for these people. And he talked about the corruption in all of the VA and the different veterans, the charities and whatnot to help the veterans out, and how such little of that money actually made it to the veterans. So I think, even though I haven't really looked into it all that much, I think it's probably very justified cuts.
Yeah, absolutely. So the jobs that Trump cut basically were administrative jobs, or simply jobs where the people would be going through papers, or just basically nothing jobs where there was maybe some desk job that required you to just act as a liaison between the veterans and the actual agency. And so there wasn't really a whole lot of purpose to those jobs. As the director of the Veterans Administration said, organization said, we're not in the business of giving out jobs. We're in the business of actually being an agency. And so I think that's really something to keep in mind, is the government is meant to be efficient, but it's not. And so we need to cut out as many inefficient jobs as possible in order to actually serve the Americans that the government was meant to serve the best.
And I think when you're looking at all of the job cuts that Trump has done, I've seen a lot of people talking about how people are losing their jobs. But at the same time, you have to look at the grand scheme of things. And the whole focus of this is on the American people as a whole and less focused on the individuals. And I guess it's also more focused on the economy, which does help the people out in the end, and setting our economy up in the future and now to be the best it can be. And I
Right.
think obviously lowering everyone's taxes as a whole and cutting unnecessary jobs, you have to do that to achieve the government we need in the long run.
Yeah. And additionally, these were jobs cut. These weren't the actual benefits that our veterans receive. And obviously, I believe that our veterans should be held in the highest respect, that the government to some degree should provide benefits for them, because some of these veterans have lost parts of their bodies in the line of duty. And so I think that that's really important, that we take care of our veterans. And so this policy isn't actually lessening that care. It's simply lessening the bureaucracy behind it.
And I think Trump understands the value of veterans. From what I've seen of him, he really cares. And I think the cuts he's making are more to the benefit of the veterans than sacrificing veterans, because just the whole VA as a unit is pretty inefficient right now. And I think if we get more of that money directly to veterans, it'll benefit them a lot. And I think that's a goal from what I've seen.
Yeah.
Also, another thing to keep in mind when looking at all these different cuts that Trump is making, you can look at the fact that these workers are losing their jobs. Even if they're unnecessary workers, there's still people who are making a living this way. And looking at it that way, you're gonna feel bad for all these cuts to unnecessary workers. But then if you look at where that money is going now, it can do so much more good if it's going to people who are actually earning it. So that's something to keep in mind too when judging whether these cuts are a good idea or not.
Yeah, and we have to keep in mind too, the government isn't necessarily a charity. Whenever you keep money in the pockets of those who actually earn it, who earn it correctly and in a legal way, it's much better for the economy, much better for the American people whenever they actually get to keep the money that they've earned. I know whenever I see a big chunk get taken out of my pay, it pains me, honestly, that I have to give that much money over to the government. especially whenever I'm realizing how much of it is inefficient and how much inefficiency is in the actual government, it really just disincentivizes me to actually do genuine work. And so whenever we actually get to keep more of the money we are earning, it makes just for a much better, much happier economy and people.
Exactly. That's a really good point too, because the value of a society isn't set. It's based off of how much progress they make, how much good work people are doing, how many resources are acquiring. All of that plays into the value of an economy. And when you take away so much of someone's income in taxes, if I'm making 80,000 a year and I only get to keep 50,000 of it, then yeah, you're right. It'll like decentivize me a ton for working hard. And therefore, if I'm not working as hard, then I'm going to add a lot less value to the economy as a whole.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so speaking of the economy and just the overall feeling of the American people with the Trump administration, Davey, what do you make of the recent turn of tariffs and also just the stocks in general dropping?
I don't know about the recent trade war with Canada. I don't know a ton about it, and so I don't really know how I feel about it. I think tariffs in the long run seem to be a good move for the economy, but at the same time, they do hurt the economy now, and so I'm really not sure 100% of my position on that.
Hmm.
But I think Trump's economy is very future focused. Everything he's doing is trying to build it for the future.
Hmm.
And I hope that whoever gets in next, whether that's Vance or someone else, will be able to continue that. Because if we get in a Democrat who tears it all down, well, then we're suffering now to build a better economy in the future, and we're not going to have that better economy in the future.
Yeah, and I think too, whenever we look at the economy now versus the economy 10, 15 years down the road, we have to remember the fact that China is becoming a more and more serious threat. And it will be far, far easier to actually become independent from China now than it will be 15 years down the road. And so we have to
Mm-hmm.
think about the threats now and then. And we also have to think about where do we want to be in 15 years? Do we want to be a country that maybe a little less wealthy, but in the long run, far better to suit the needs of our people? Or do we want to be a country that is reliant on everyone else? And quite frankly, I don't want to be reliant on everyone else. I want America to be a self run country and self operating without any foreign intervention.
I think that's a major difference I see between the Trump administration and the Biden administration. Because right now, if we suffer from high taxes, I know it's going to our national security, it's going to getting rid of the illegal immigrants, it's going to basically just create a better society and prepare for the future. Whereas under the Biden administration, you had really high taxes and you didn't really know where it was going
Mhm.
besides Ukraine,
Yeah.
the 50 some billion dollars to Ukraine, and all those different things. You, yeah, it's just, it hurt and you didn't see any benefit from it. Whereas the Trump administration, if it hurts, at least you're going to see the benefits from it. And the benefits may not always be exactly what you want, but you can see where it's going to.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I think you brought up a really interesting point about the money going to Ukraine and other places around the world, whether we support the causes or not. They aren't actually, these things aren't actually going towards American citizens. And I think that that's really important simply because while they might help in the long run for, say, the general world security, they aren't actually helping Americans right now and here. And I think that that's what we need to see. Sure, those problems need to be addressed, but I don't think throwing money at them is the best way to go about fixing those problems.
hmm There's definitely a balance to be had between balancing like world security and the American economy.
Mhm.
And I think that line is drawn a lot farther towards helping America than most people think.
Mhm.
Because most people think America has to help maintain the world peace and all that. And it definitely does, but going that far to helping Ukraine, dumping billions and billions of dollars to
Hmm.
Ukraine to help them fight Russia. I think that was too far. And I
Yeah.
think we can't afford to do that as America with our
Hmm.
national debt and with the economic status that we have right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And you bring up a really good point, the national debt. I don't think we should be active fighting other people's wars while we're so much in debt. If we want to do this as a means of, say, military experimentation, like giving another country weapons that we don't necessarily want to test ourselves, we could do that. But with the debt levels we have, simply can't afford to be actively giving other people our projects. We need to focus, okay, here's America's problem here and now. Let's fix this, then maybe we can talk.
Yeah, and I think there are times where we can't afford to not help out other nations. For
Mhm.
example, if, China and North Korea and Russia all teamed up and started taking over the world, we have to do something about
Right.
that before it gets to America.
Mhm.
But I don't think Russia attacking Ukraine warrants us giving billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine, given our national debt.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a really important point too, simply because you've got to look at the big picture. If, say, China, Russia, and North Korea were all to team up against the world, basically, 20 years from now, we would be fighting for possibly our very existence. Whereas whenever Russia attacks one country, as sad as it is, it's the previous administration's fault, and we can't necessarily go back and fix that. Looking forward, we can possibly reevaluate how we go about doing security with other countries, but we can't simply pour money into a war that ultimately, I believe, Ukraine will probably lose. And so I think that that's a really important point to make.
Yeah. And I think our government and our country can't afford to have a big heart right now
Hmm.
because every bit of money that we're putting into someone else's economy is more money that's not going into America's economy.
Hmm.
And the American people are suffering as well. And it's our government's duty to look after the people of our own nation rather than the people of other nations. And so, yes, we have to look at other countries, help out where we need to for our sake, because, like you were saying, if Russia, China, and North Korea all teamed up, we're looking at maybe fighting for our very existence in 20 years. We have to address that because that's going to directly affect America.
Hmm.
But we can't just have a big heart and give money to whichever countries need it because we need to look after our own people first. And that's not happening to the extent we need it to right now.
Hmm. Yeah. I think that's an interesting point too. America having a big heart. Whenever I think of the country, the government of America having a big heart, honestly, that kind of doesn't give me a good impression. That kind of scares me simply because whenever someone else is taking my money and using it, I want them to be as useful with it as possible. And simply giving it to other people isn't always the best use of the money. I want to have basically effects immediately or long term that will benefit, well, in essence, me. If that's something the private individual or even an organization wants to do, I am more than happy to support that. I will support that 100%, generally speaking. Um, but as far as the government doing it, we have to question, okay, is this actually the government's place to actually support these other countries or basically wars?
Hmm. And I think that's a major difference between how Republicans run the government and how Democrats run the government. Because the whole Democrat agenda is focused on pretty much just the generosity stuff, giving to the American people and giving to other countries and giving people money, which economically doesn't make sense and historically makes an economy fail.
Hmm.
But that's kind of the focus, is helping people. Whereas Republicans are very business minded, especially Trump, because he's an actual businessman. You see it a lot.
Hmm.
He's very focused on efficiency, lowering taxes, all of that stuff. You earn it, you keep it type of stuff. And very focused on making the country better in that way and cutting all those ways that Democrats are generous to people with our taxes, which is
Yeah.
not exactly generous.
No. Yeah. It's not exactly generous whenever you're gifted free money.
Yeah,
I can be generous with your money quite a bit, Davey.
exactly. Yeah. The government makes no money of its own, so anything it's giving away, it's taken from someone else,
Hmm.
which is what we have to look at while looking at all these government programs that are being so nice to all these people in need.
Hmm. Yeah. So last week, one of Elon Musk's Starship rockets blew up while it was taking off. So this makes the second out of 9 flights that this rocket type has blown up. So a lot of people are wondering whether or not this rocket type is safe. Davey, what are your thoughts?
I don't really know the difference between his Starship and really any of the other rockets. I haven't looked into SpaceX all that much and what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Okay, so basically it's using a different type of fuel than previous rocket types. It's a fairly new development in how they go about burning the fuel. And so the only other type of rocket that's done this is actually a Soviet Union type space shuttle back in the 80s. And so I think that's pretty important that we have to realize that this is fairly new technology. We weren't able to actually get the data from the Soviet style ships. And so this is fairly new for any company going around making ships. And so there's going to be a couple bugs in the system. I don't know if that means that they need more ground testing or what. The FAA has actually grounded them until they can actually show what exactly went wrong with this shuttle crash and the previous one. So, yeah, that's in a nutshell what went wrong with it.
Anything to do with SpaceX blows my mind a little bit. Just the progress they're making
Oh, yeah.
and the fact that it's a private organization instead of government funded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just really cool to me.
Yeah.
It's one of the amazing things about Elon Musk
Mm.
in my mind.
Yeah. Another thing that's really interesting is apparently Starship rocket is only about 100 million. Now that sounds like a lot of money, but whenever you compare that with the space shuttle program, the space shuttle was averaging about $1 billion in the costs for maintenance of one spaceship. So I think that's really
Wow.
impressive how much Elon Musk has been able to knock down the price for about 4 times the payload. And I think that's pretty good return, honestly. Now, obviously, it's got some safety problems right now, but I believe those things can be eliminated in the future. But we'll see.
And I like Elon Musk's take on anything to do with SpaceX because he's kind of designing it to make it less of an amazing thing to go to space. He's trying to make it cheaper and more normal, I guess,
Hmm.
by the whole reusing the rockets and all that, which is
Hmm.
just amazing stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, I believe that $100 million is actually the total cost of the rocket itself. Now, these things are going to be
hmm
able to be reused, and I believe each launch will only supposedly cost like $15 million, which is incredible. That's very low
That's
cost.
crazy cheap.
Yeah,
Yeah, when I think space travel, I think a lot of money,
yeah,
not just 15 million bucks.
yeah. So I'm pretty optimistic. I don't know how much time it'll take to fix these issues, but all in all, pretty hopeful for Elon Musk and SpaceX. They're doing good work there,
hmm
and I hope they keep doing it.
Yep. X was hacked the other day. I guess we don't really know who it is, but a team of hackers called Darkstorm is taking credit for the hacking. They're a pro-Palestinian group,
Hmm.
and it's kind of crazy how much hate Elon Musk has been getting since he joined in politics. I wouldn't have expected it, but
Hmm.
that's what's happening.
Yeah, yeah. So, do we exactly know how long X was down, or what exactly happened? Was there data that they stole? What happened?
I'm not sure. I didn't hear about any stolen data. I just heard they were able to shut it down, which is a really high profile hacking for a company with like such high security
Hmm.
to be able to be shut down by it.
Hmm. I guess with that being said, it's got to take quite a bit of knowledge to take down a system this big. It's not exactly just my computer. I mean, how many people would you need on a team like this, and what sort of operational scale would you need?
It would have to be huge. I mean, I'm not all that into hacking, but Elon Musk said it would either take a huge group of organized people, or he mentioned even like a country backing up the whole operation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thanks for watching this episode of Vanguard. Come back next week for more, and if you like this kind of content, like and subscribe.